By the time Vivian Ashworth built her empire on my stolen ranch, I already owned the mineral rights beneath every mansion in her development. But let me back up. Picture this. I'm halfway across the world, dodging mortars in Eastern Europe, serving my country. Out of nowhere, a phone call cuts through the chaos. The voice on the other end tells me news that makes my blood run cold. While I'm bleeding for freedom overseas, some HOA president named Vivian has legally sold off my grandfather's ranch, 1,500 acres of prime American soil that's been in my family since 1892. The same land where my Purple Heart grandfather is buried, gone, for pennies on the dollar. When my boots finally touch American soil again, I expect to see wide pastures and the same fences my grandfather built by hand. Instead, I'm greeted by fresh surveyor paint burning into century-old oak trees. Bright orange sold signs stab into the earth like knives. Surveyors in reflective vests drive stakes straight through my family's rose garden, my inheritance, my bloodline, my history, all marked for destruction. 800 acres, allegedly sold to Willowmere Estates, an exclusive lakefront development of 50 luxury mansions where tech millionaires sip wine on land their soft hands never worked. Land worth $8,000 an acre had been stolen for just over $2,000. And worse, they fenced off my family cemetery. My grandfather's fresh grave rattled in chain link like it belonged to strangers. That was the moment my blood turned to fire. Then I met her, Vivian Ashworth, 52 years old, white Mercedes G-Wagon, designer sunglasses, the kind of smirk that could curdle milk. She's filed 47 HOA violation complaints in the past year alone. The self-declared queen of control. And now she was standing in my driveway, tossing forged documents in my face, fake tax delinquency notices, manufactured debt, claims that my grandfather hadn't paid a dime. My bank records proved otherwise. But Vivian didn't care. This is what happens when military families think they're above civic responsibility, she sneered, to a soldier still in uniform, fresh from 18 months of combat. The audacity burned hotter than tear gas in my lungs. That first meeting was just her opening salvo. Within 48 hours, she filed a restraining order, painting me as a violent veteran with military-style threats. A local judge, whose golf partner happened to be Vivian's attorney, signed it without hearing my side. Overnight, I was branded a danger in my own hometown. Security cameras sprouted around her neighborhood, pointed at my property. Posts on community apps painted me as a PTSD-crazed outsider. She even held community safety meetings about me, poisoning my reputation. Vivian thought she was playing chess. What she didn't know was that I'd been trained in military intelligence. I don't just fight battles, I plan campaigns. The first step, paperwork. My grandfather used to say, "When politicians lie, the truth hides in the documents they pray you'll never find." So, I drove 200 miles to the state archives, burning my last $47 on gas. And there it was, the smoking gun, original 1892 land grants, my grandfather's Purple Heart records, and most importantly, proof that every single tax payment had been made on time. The so-called delinquency was nothing but a clerical scam, payments diverted by a one-digit error, the oldest trick in the book. Fraud, plain and simple. Vivian's emergency sale had another fatal flaw. It happened 30 days before the legal minimum waiting period. In her greed, she couldn't even wait long enough to make her theft technically legal. She left behind a paper trail screaming corruption louder than a siren at midnight. But when I thought justice was finally on my side, Vivian doubled down. Expensive lawyers, false lawsuits, harassment campaigns. Suddenly my cattle were labeled dangerous livestock. Running my tractor before sunrise became disturbing the peace. Fixing my own fences became unauthorized construction, the crown jewel of her cruelty. Her groundskeepers ripped up my grandfather's rose garden, 60 years of heritage flowers, under the cover of night. Her excuse? The roses were encroaching on community property. We have standards. That's when I realized this wasn't about money, this was about power. Vivian thrived on crushing anyone who dared resist her, but she underestimated one thing. I wasn't just a veteran. I was a Thornfield, and I had one final gift from my grandfather: mineral rights buried deep in those 1960s property documents. While she built luxury mansions on stolen soil, I owned everything beneath them. 50 homes, $47 million in property, and one ticking legal time bomb she never saw coming. While digging into the HOA's corporate status, Sarah and I uncovered something that ripped the mask off Vivian Ashworth's empire. Not only had the Willowmere HOA been operating illegally for years, Vivian herself had directly profited from the theft of my land. Her company, Ashworth Aesthetics Landscaping, had quietly collected a $180,000 beautification contract from the HOA in the exact same month they acquired my ranch. She had literally stolen my inheritance, and then paid herself with the spoils. It was like watching a bank robber demand a consulting fee for advising the bank on its own security system. Sarah wasted no time. She filed a motion to dismiss every HOA action taken under their illegal corporate status. When court day came, the room was packed. Residents leaned forward as Vivian's 800-per-hour attorney tried and failed to explain why his client's HOA was, in fact, an unauthorized, quasi-criminal organization masquerading as a neighborhood association. Watching him sweat under the judge's glare was better than primetime television. But Vivian wasn't finished. She called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center. Only 12 of 50 homeowners showed up. Most were either traveling or simply fed up with her endless power plays. At 11 o'clock at night, with nothing but her cronies present, she forced through retroactive votes to approve past actions and hurriedly pushed incorporation papers. The smell of stale coffee hung heavy in the air, but the stench of desperation was stronger. Her shrill voice gave her away. She was scrambling, and everyone could hear it. 2 days later, a process server knocked on my door. Another lawsuit. This time, Vivian demanded $1.2 million in punitive damages, claiming my legal challenges were harassment. She threatened to seize my remaining 700 acres to satisfy the judgment. Standing on my porch, the lawsuit in one hand, my grandfather's wind chimes ringing above me in the evening breeze, I remembered something he always said. When your enemy is making mistakes, don't interrupt them. I wasn't going to stop Vivian from digging her own grave. Her paranoia became legendary. With her lawsuits failing, she turned on her own neighbors. Christmas lights left up past January 2nd. A $200 fine. A homeowner dared to plant tomatoes in their backyard? A $500 penalty for unauthorized agricultural activity. She even threatened foreclosure against a grieving widow, Margaret Clearwater, over $45 in late fees. Margaret had just lost her husband to cancer. Vivian's cold reply, "Grief doesn't excuse financial irresponsibility." That was the final straw. Margaret quietly started a private Facebook group called Willowmere Truth Tellers. Within 2 weeks, it grew from 5 members to 43. The stories they shared read like a horror anthology of suburban tyranny. Navy veteran Tom Bridgewater, whose lawn was so meticulously maintained it earned him 3 separate violations for being excessively uniform, became my first ally. One afternoon at the hardware store, while we both bought security cameras, he leaned in and whispered, "That woman's crazier than a soup sandwich, son. What can we do to stop her?" That's when we went on offense. I began hosting Your Rights workshops at the local library. The first meeting drew 8 curious neighbors, the second, 22. By the third, we had standing room only, with people taking notes like their freedom depended on it, because in Willowmere Estates it did. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Margaret found the original 1965 HOA covenants tucked away in her attic, left behind by her late husband, who had been on the original development committee. The brittle yellow pages were pure dynamite. They explicitly prohibited the HOA from acquiring any land beyond the original 50-lot plat. Vivian's purchase of my ranch hadn't just violated state law, it violated the HOA's own founding documents. In legal terms, her actions were ultra vires, beyond the organization's legal authority, which meant every deal she had pushed through was void from the start, as if it never happened. But Margaret's attic still had one more grenade. Tom dug deeper into the community's finances. His investigation revealed $89,000 missing from the pool maintenance fund over 3 years. The money had been funneled directly into Vivian's landscaping company for work that was either never performed or outrageously overpriced. Residents were paying top dollar for a pool that had turned into a swamp, algae so thick you could nearly walk across it, broken filters, diving boards duct taped together. Yet Vivian's company billed $30,000 for premium pool services just the year before. When the truth broke at the next HOA meeting, the community center felt like a dictatorship collapsing in real time. Vivian stood at the podium, her voice cracking as angry residents demanded answers. She'd even hired 2 private security guards to keep order, but they looked more uncomfortable by the minute, realizing they weren't protecting a neighborhood. They were guarding a tyrant from her own neighbors. This is what happens when outside agitators infiltrate our community, she shrieked, pointing directly at me. That's when Margaret stood up. Her teacher's voice cut through the chaos like a razor. Vivian, I've lived here longer than you've been alive. This isn't about outsiders. This is about a board member stealing from her own neighbors. The applause that followed rattled the windows. For the first time, Vivian looked cornered. Her empire of fear was cracking. But the real bombshell was still to come. At 6:47 a.m. one Tuesday, Sarah Chen called me, her voice shaking with excitement. She'd been combing through original development records and found something almost unbelievable. When Willowmere Estates was first developed, the original landowner sold only the surface rights. He retained ownership of everything beneath, the mineral rights, the subsurface access, even the foundation support rights. In 1963, my grandfather quietly purchased those subsurface rights for $500, thinking they might be valuable one day. What he really bought was the legal foundation under every mansion in Willowmere Estates. Sarah explained it simply. Imagine, you own a house, but someone else owns the ground your basement sits in. That's exactly what this is. The implications hit like a freight train. I could legally demand the removal of every single mansion built on my subsurface property. The estimated cost to relocate all 50 homes? Between $12 and $15 million. Or the homeowners could buy the rights from me at fair market value. An appraiser put that number at $45 million. When Sarah presented this to Vivian's legal team, their marble offices turned silent. The attorney billed $25,000 just for that emergency meeting. Their conclusion? My legal position was unassailable. No insurance policy covered property rights disputes of this magnitude. The foundation of their empire, literally, belonged to me. The fallout was immediate. Moving trucks rolled into Willowmere. Real estate values plummeted overnight as mortgage. Companies learned that title insurance couldn't guarantee these properties. Vivian's world collapsed in full view of the very cameras she had installed to spy on me. The sound of her $800 fountain pen clattering onto a marble conference table, captured on her own surveillance system, became the soundtrack of her downfall. Her $1.2 million mansion was now worth only what I decided to charge for the land beneath it. That night Margaret called, her laughter bubbling through the phone. "Ezra, honey, Vivian's been driving in circles for 3 hours. She looks like a lost dog that can't find its way home." Tom was more blunt. "She thought she was playing chess with a country boy. Turns out you were playing three-dimensional chess while she was still learning checkers." Now, the nuclear option was in my hands. I could evict every homeowner, forcing the demolition of 50 luxury homes, or I could negotiate a settlement that returned my stolen land and made Vivian's theft the most expensive mistake in county history. Because here's what Vivian never understood. Military training doesn't teach you to destroy for sport. It teaches you to win with precision, to minimize collateral damage. My fight wasn't with the families tricked into living here. It was with the tyrant who had built her empire on lies. And for the first time, Vivian Ashworth finally understood. The ground beneath her empire had never been hers to stand on. When you hold weapons of mass destruction, you don't simply press a button. You plan a campaign, one that maximizes impact while minimizing collateral damage. That was the approach Sarah took as she built a legal strike force that would have impressed Pentagon war planners. We had a property rights attorney with an undefeated record defending veterans, a forensic accountant capable of following dirty money through labyrinths of shell companies, and a real estate expert whose valuations had withstood Supreme Court scrutiny. Our headquarters was my grandfather's study, now transformed into a war room. Maps, deeds, financial ledgers, and legal briefs covered every inch of oak surface like battlefield charts. The air smelled of leather, paper, and stale coffee, but carried the electric charge of imminent victory. We had divided our offensive into 3 phases: exposure, negotiation, and, if necessary, total enforcement. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, our forensic accountant, laid out Vivian's embezzlement trail with the precision of a surgeon. She had siphoned $340,000 across 4 years through phantom contracts for landscaping, security, and maintenance services that had never materialized. The pattern was unmistakable. An HOA transformed into her personal money laundering syndicate. Our arsenal of evidence was overwhelming. Original mineral rights deeds from 1963, forensic analysis of forged tax filings revealing mismatched ink and printing methods, HOA financials showing a methodical siphoning of funds, even time-stamped video of her unauthorized property modifications. But the real coup came from Margaret, whose weekly bridge club turned into an intelligence agency more effective than the CIA. After enough wine, Vivian's closest allies revealed secrets she never thought would leave the room. Through this network, we learned of a Swiss account holding $2.3 million, the exact sum she'd used to purchase my stolen land. Meanwhile, Tom organized something powerful. A convoy of combat veterans from 4 counties, Purple Hearts and Gold, stars among them, mobilized to witness justice. Their motorcycles and trucks weren't just transportation. They were symbols of a constitution defended in blood, rolling to confront the woman who had desecrated a veteran's family legacy. Our media offensive mirrored military psychological warfare. We crafted press packets contrasting my grandfather's decorated service with Vivian's theft, curated social media campaigns about the family cemetery trapped behind enemy lines, and funneled tips to investigative journalists. Sarah built settlement tiers ranging from total restitution and damages to forced buyouts of subsurface rights. But our sharpest blade was hidden in plain sight: insurance loopholes. Homeowners' policies excluded property disputes, and title insurers refused to defend claims based on land never legally owned. Vivian's neighbors were about to realize that their houses stood on crumbling foundations, financially and legally. The final nail came from an environmental report. HOA construction had poisoned the lake with runoff from illegal drainage systems, putting Vivian in direct violation of federal EPA regulations. Suddenly, this wasn't just theft, it was a federal crime with criminal liability. Margaret confirmed what we already suspected. Vivian was preparing to flee to Switzerland the moment the verdict turned against her. Her plan involved liquidating assets, wiring cash offshore, and vanishing before charges stuck. But she underestimated how fast federal agents move when stolen military property is involved. The rebellion swelled. Margaret's petition had signatures from 38 of 50 homeowners demanding Vivian's removal. Tom's recall petition exceeded the requirement by 15. Local media was circling, and the state attorney general's office opened a fraud probe. I sat in my grandfather's old chair that night, surrounded by the papers that would restore our honor. His dog tags caught the lamplight from the portrait above me. For the first time in decades, justice wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. But desperation makes predators reckless. Vivian unleashed sabotage with the subtlety of artillery fire. My family's water well cracked overnight, drained dry. County records showed the contractor responsible worked exclusively with her company. Then came false environmental reports, accusing me of polluting the lake with military chemicals, the very lake she had poisoned. Inspectors tested soil cleaner than a hospital floor. Still, her smear campaign escalated. Rumors of violent PTSD episodes spread. The diner refused me service. The hardware clerk eyed me like a live grenade. Then she crossed a line that revealed true madness. In the courthouse parking lot, she offered me $500,000 in cash to leave town, dressing it as compassion for a troubled veteran. Her condescension was nauseating, but she didn't know every word was captured on my recorder. Her veiled threats would play well before a jury. Still, she wasn't finished. Professional vandals sliced my cattle fence with surgical precision while I was at the VA. Hours later, one of my grandfather's prize Angus was struck and killed on the highway. Before I could process the loss, Vivian staged a press spectacle, painting me as negligent and unstable. Local headlines branded me a dangerous veteran, while ignoring sabotage entirely. But Margaret's intelligence exposed Vivian's nuclear option, bankruptcy to shield assets while funneling her mansion through Cayman shell companies. At the same time, masked men sabotaged my equipment, cut tractor brake lines, and poisoned my grandfather's oak tree. These weren't pranks. They were attempted murder. Every crime Sarah cataloged only tightened the noose around Vivian's empire. The FBI had already frozen her accounts. Vivian's final play was pure theater. She staged a doppelganger stunt, hiring a look-alike to cause chaos in a tavern while cameras rolled. Edited footage flooded social media, framing me as unhinged and violent. Soon after, a sheriff's deputy found planted bourbon in my truck feeding a DUI charge. Her fabricated restraining order portrayed me as a tactical threat capable of neutralizing targets. The judge banned me from even passing Willower's gates. But while she plotted her escape, we set the trap. Margaret confirmed Vivian's 72-hour timeline. Dissolve the HOA, drain funds, and catch a one-way flight to Zurich with tickets bought using HOA money. Sarah coordinated with federal prosecutors for precision timing. Warrants would be issued 1 hour before departure. Vivian's passport was flagged, her accounts frozen, her exit sealed shut. By now, the tide had shifted completely. Media headlines declared, "Veteran's legacy stolen by HOA tyrant." Tom's veteran convoy had multiplied into hundreds. Combat riders from across 4 states were coming to stand guard as justice fell. Vivian's last negotiation attempt was pathetic. She offered to settle by selling back half my land for full price while keeping the other half. She threatened to burn down the community center if I refused. But Margaret delivered the finishing blow. During one of her bridge nights, Vivian confessed, under the haze of wine, to forging the tax documents herself. Her empire of lies was collapsing, and this time there was nowhere left to run. She had bragged one too many times. Over wine at the bridge club, Viv and Ashworth laughed about how easy it was to trick stupid government clerks and fabricate fake tax delinquencies. What she didn't know was that Margaret had been recording the entire confession on her phone. Every incriminating word, captured in crystal-clear audio, was now evidence strong enough to topple her empire. The stage was set for the next day's community meeting. Vivian thought she was walking in to dictate terms, deliver one final ultimatum, and then vanish into the night with her stolen millions. She had no idea the FBI was already in position, her escape routes monitored, her allies flipped, and her own words weaponized against her. By 6 p.m., the community center looked less like a neighborhood gathering and more like a forward operating base. 30 motorcycles and pickup trucks formed a precise perimeter, American flags gleaming in the evening sun like battle standards. Combat veterans in leather jackets lined the walkway, creating an honor guard that would have made Arlington proud. Inside, 200 residents filled every seat, while local reporters adjusted their cameras as though covering a presidential debate. Sheriff Mitchell's deputies stood at each exit, not for crowd control, but to ensure a certain someone couldn't bolt. Then she arrived. A white Mercedes purred into the lot, and Vivian stepped out like a queen returning to her court. Her $800 an hour attorney shadowed her, his leather briefcase polished to a mirror shine. She strode past her neighbors with a smile of pure condescension, designer suit pressed to perfection, makeup flawless. To her, these were peasants. To us, she was walking into a trap. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice sliding into that slick cadence of politicians who sound sincere but drip with contempt. "We're here to resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding with Mr. Thornfield. Despite his military service, which we all respect, certain legal complexities require adult supervision." The arrogance was suffocating. She had stolen from veterans, laundered money, and built her kingdom on fraud, and now she was lecturing a combat soldier about supervision. Then came her offer. She proposed that I repurchase 400 acres of disputed land for $1.22 million, calling it a generous discount to reflect our appreciation for veterans. She spoke like she was bestowing charity, not negotiating after years of theft. That's when I stood up. 30 veterans straightened in unison, leather creaking like the movement of a single unit. The room fell silent. "Before we discuss money," I said evenly, "let's discuss ownership." Sarah dimmed the lights and brought the projector to life. The original 1963 mineral rights documents filled the screen, my grandfather's signature and the county clerk's seal glowing in high definition. Gasps rippled across the room. "These documents prove that I own the subsurface rights beneath every mansion in Willowere Estates," I continued. "Every foundation, every basement, every septic system sits on land that legally belongs to me." A whisper carried from the front row. "Oh my God," as homeowners realized what that meant. "The current market value for those rights is $47 million, I said. "Alternatively, every one of your homes can be relocated for $15 million. The attorney snapped his briefcase shut, already calculating how fast he could flee. But I wasn't finished. Margaret rose, smartphone in hand. "And now," she said, her voice trembling but steady, Let's hear from Vivian herself. Her recording played through the speakers crystal clear. Vivian's own voice bragged about forgeries, fake liens, and stolen land. Every smug word she had ever spoken over cocktails now echoed in a courtroom of her peers. The crowd murmured like a jury hearing a guilty verdict. That's when FBI agent Rodriguez stepped forward, badge gleaming. "Vivian Ashworth," he declared, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." The room exploded like a stadium after a touchdown. Cameras flashed. Residents shouted. Vivian shrieked, "This is persecution! I built this community! You should be thanking me!" Her hands shook as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Sheriff Mitchell stepped forward with his own warrant, adding money laundering and conspiracy to the list. Her heels clacked against the floor as she was marched out in shackles. Veterans stood in silent salute, not for her, but for justice. Someone shouted, "That's how we handle enemies of America," and the room erupted in applause. Outside, engines roared like thunder as the veteran convoy rolled in victory. Justice came swiftly. Vivian was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.1 million in restitution. Her county co-conspirator lost his pension, served 2 years, and was barred from public service forever. For the first time in decades, accountability had teeth. Within 6 months, my family's 2,500 acres were fully restored. Margaret became HOA president. Tom took over as treasurer, and they ran the board with radical transparency, open books, monthly reports, and unanimous approval for every dollar spent. No more dictators, no more secrets, just neighbors protecting each other. I sold the subsurface rights back at a steep discount, $8.2 million spread over 10 years, interest-free. Call it a veteran's discount for families deceived by crooks. From that compromise came healing. The community rebuilt, neighbors reconciled, and a scholarship fund for military children was born, funded from settlement money. Dozens of students went to college. Some became officers. Some became lawyers defending veterans' rights. Our story became a precedent in law schools nationwide, known as the Thornfield Doctrine. Sarah now travels the country teaching veterans how to fight HOA corruption. And me? I built a ranch on the hill overlooking my grandfather's grave, the rose garden blooming again with the same varieties he once tended. Last week, I got a call from a Marine sergeant in California. His town was trying to seize his family farm. "Sir, I heard what you did in Willowere," he said, his voice breaking. "Can you help me fight these bastards?" I looked at the wall of thank you letters from veterans across the country. Purple Heart recipients, Gold Star families, soldiers who used our playbook to win back what was stolen. "Son," I told him, "pack your documents and get ready for war. Justice isn't finished yet." Through my window, children's laughter floated from the rose garden, mixing with the soft music of my grandfather's wind chimes. Some battles end in surrender. Others end in victories so complete they light the path for everyone else. When David beats Goliath, that's justice. But when David teaches every other David how to fight, that's freedom.